The Haunted Mind by Ransom Backus. Chapter 3. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet. I brushed the low-hanging cobwebs out of my way as I continued my survey of the Baron's house. And once again I found myself going through the house alone. I had waited for Todd for nearly an hour outside of my uncle's mansion before his messenger had arrived, announcing that Todd couldn't make it as planned. So I would have to continue the assessment alone. The messenger seemed apologetic and assured me that my brother would do everything in his power to provide most of the muscle concerning the cleaning and repair work. But that was Todd for you. He was charismatic and quite convincing when he wanted to be, but whether he came through on his word was a toss of the dice. I had learned early on not to hold my breath when he said he would do something. His type will change their mind on the spur of a moment, then justify it. On top of that, he had a way of making me either feel guilty or like a complete ass for expecting him to come through on his word. So there I was, making a second attempt at the task at hand. I was getting used to the lump in my throat, the pounding and tightness in my chest. They became mere white noise for me. The memory of the last horror I had encountered in this house was still fresh in my mind. I saw no sign of it this trip, though. Not a drop of the black blood, not a decaying piece of its rotted flesh could be found. I considered myself thankful, yet at the same time perplexed. At that point, I didn't bother to ask why. I didn't want to know why. I was just grateful that it was gone. The smell of death still hung in the air. It wasn't nearly as bad as before. Perhaps it was my own overactive imagination mixed with opium-triggering hallucination from the memories. Perhaps it was real. Either way, it didn't really matter. All that mattered was that, as long as I was in the Baron's mansion, my nerves were at a fragile breaking point. I froze in my tracks as I heard some voices. One was masculine and instantly familiar, yet I couldn't place the face of who it was. The other voices were female. I couldn't understand a word that was said no matter how hard I tried. Who the devil would be here in a place like this? I wondered. I drew closer. The voices grew louder. There were even moments of yelling and anger still. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't understand a word that was being said. Was it another language? Perhaps it was Dutch. But the voice of the man sounded so familiar, I turned it over and over in my mind until I grew weary of thinking, trying to figure out who it was. I suppose that there was only one way to find out. But here, in this creepy old house, in which no one dared to dwell after the Baron had died, I was assured that no one else would be here. I was assured that I would be alone. Madame Beatrice wouldn't set foot inside of the building until all of the renovations had been made. She was, after all, a lady of class and sophistication. In fact, she was the only reason I had agreed to return. Upon our meeting at the brothel, she had promised me a handsome sum for all my hard work. After all, no one else wanted to do it. I suppose that's why I decided to venture in alone once more. The sooner this was done, the sooner I could be on my merry way and enjoy a few luxuries. I would, of course, be welcome any time, free of charge at Madame Beatrice's house. "Hello!" I called, trying to hide the fear which my voice betrayed. "Who goes there?" The conversation continued as though I hadn't spoken at all. I drew nearer. It seemed that whoever was talking was on the other side of the large door at the end of the hallway. I put my hand to the knob and opened it slightly. A loud creaking sound followed it. It didn't seem to alarm the ones on the other side. Still, there was no response, no pause in the conversation, which was escalating by now to a full-scale argument. I feared the violence was going to ensue next. I went through the doorway, which led into a large sitting room. The furniture was covered with white sheets, with perhaps an inch of dust and cobwebs on them. The fireplace was filled with ashes and perhaps the remnants of a once smoldering log. What I saw fails my ability to convey to you accurately. Oh, there were people in the room, yet they were transparent. They cast an eerie blue light. I couldn't see their faces, yet I could observe each and every movement of limbs and body postures. The one I presumed to be the male was standing, while 3 females were seated on a large sofa. They were dressed as Madame Beatrice's finest whores that money could buy. He was the loudest and angriest sounding, and the more I looked at him, the more familiar he seemed. I still couldn't observe a face. I could not for the life of me place who he was. It nagged at my mind like a subcutaneous itch on the small of one's back that one cannot quite reach. There was no time to opine and ponder, for the male became quite irate, picked up a long, sharp knife from a nearby table and moved menacingly towards the women, waving the knife this way and that. They shrank back in terror. What followed was the most horrific bloodbath a man such as myself could ever imagine. The blade sliced through flesh like a hot knife through butter, and blood sprayed everywhere as thick as strawberry jam. While the phantoms weren't corporeal, I felt very real blood splash and spray on my face. I choked back bile as I ducked behind a chair to avoid a further mess. I could hear the screams of the whores one by one, replaced by a gurgling sound as the throats were cut and they were finally hushed in blood. I peered around the side of the chair and watched as the man kept his knife in hand and walked through the door on the far end. He didn't open the door, mind you, he just passed through it as a fish passes through water. It wasn't but a moment before I heard more screams and sounds of horrific violence. My morbid curiosity overrode my fear, and I decided to take a peek behind the other door. It was then that everything had changed. I found myself in the main banquet hall where the Baron was fond of throwing extravagant parties. This time I lost control of the contents of my stomach, and they joined the macabre display on the floor. Blood oozed through the cracks in the floorboards. Severed body parts lay strewn everywhere. They were the bodies of women who I also presumed to be whores. Heads with flowing hair intact, torsos with breasts removed, gushing blood, arms and legs and bits and pieces of internal organs carpeted the floor in a ghastly arrangement. Mind you, they were arranged as though someone had placed them with great care, exactly as they were. It was all I could take. I immediately returned to the front door of the Baron's house, and I found my way out.